There.
Telling me to dance, taking a chance. Telling me to dance, taking a chance.
Oh, wow.
Hi, everybody.
If you all could only be backstage with us, like we have played that opening 3 times because we couldn't figure out how to make it go live. Diana's the one who does all the technical stuff.
Yes, we're missing our fearless leader tonight.
So anyway, welcome everyone to the Isn't It Romantic Book Club. I'm Abbie Roads. Tonight we're beaming into lots of fun places to talk about The Cowboy of Sunset Ridge by Maisey Yates. We're beaming into the Isn't It Romantic Book Club, Abbie's Dangerously Dark Darlings, Jennie's Page Turners. We're going to be on YouTube. We're going to be in a podcast. And we're in Team Source Books today. So we're kind of all over the place. I'm Abbie Roads. I write dark romantic thrillers. I tell people to think an episode of Criminal Minds meets a romance novel with the hint of paranormal. Here's a little stack of all my books, and here's Capturing Fate, the latest one. So you're next, Sharon.
Okay. My name's Sharon Wray. I write romantic suspense as well. Think like Dan Brown mysteries, but really hot sex and really cute guys. Got a bunch of books. My newest one comes out May 17th. I know you all have been waiting and asking me patiently, but the link will go up in the live group tomorrow in paperback and the ebook.
I can't wait to get it.
I'm so excited. And then
I'm excited too. You've made us wait for this one.
Yeah, there were a lot of things behind this book that made it wait that were out of my control, but that's okay. It'll go live and then I can move on. So I'm very excited. So who's next, Jennie?
Me. Hi, everybody. I am coming to you from a remote community college classroom tonight, an hour away from my house. And I don't have any books. So look, Sharon is helping me. She's holding up my books because I write Western, I write cozy mysteries, I write romantic comedy that all have love, laughter, and happily ever after in them. And it's kind of fun that I'm in a library tonight. I'm in a library coming to you live. And that's just a perfect segue for my new book that's coming out in July that is actually about a librarian. And look, I have this hot little cover, Never Enough.
I love that cover.
And this book is actually about a librarian. So I thought that was kind of perfect. And there's just a bunch of students out there working. So I'm pretty excited about this. So tonight, you guys, we're missing Diana. She's at a writing retreat and having a great time. And the Blonde Brigade is going to.
You've not been the Blonde Brigade in a while.
We are just going to be in charge tonight. So when the boss is away, you don't know what's going to happen tonight. We already messed up the intro. So we are super excited about tonight and our guest tonight. And I will tell you before I forget, because you all know that we usually forget this a lot. So we're going to do a giveaway tonight. I'll tell you more about Maisey's giveaway in a few minutes, but for anybody that's commenting, we will do a drawing in the next couple of days. If you leave a comment or ask a question, we're going to do a $20 gift card or an item from our store. So let me tell you a little bit about our guest tonight. We're so thrilled to have Maisey Yates with us. So Maisey Yates is a fellow Western romance author. I met her back at RWA, back when we were doing live conferences. And I had just had my first mass market paperback book come out with Source Books, my first Western romance. And she actually knew who I was because she had seen my new hockey playing cowboy book come out. And she really took me under her wing and spent an hour with me. She didn't even know me. She spent an hour with me, hanging out with me. And she just impressed the heck out of me. And beyond that, she's an amazing writer. So let me tell you a little bit about her as we bring her in. Maisey Yates is a New York Times bestselling author of over 100 romance novels. Whether she's writing strong, I know, should I say that again? 100
Wow.
Whether she's writing strong, hardworking cowboys, dissolute princes, or multi-generational family stories, she loves getting lost in fictional worlds. An avid knitter with a dangerous yarn addiction and an aversion to housework, she is totally our kind of gal. Maisey lives with her husband and 3 kids in rural Oregon. So we would love to introduce you tonight to
Hi,
Maisey.
Maisey. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be, like, even virtual events are exciting at this point. People.
Yeah. So first of all, I don't know if you could you hear all of that?
Yes, I could.
Oh, okay.
So 100 books. What are you at right now? Because I know that bio is probably old, isn't it?
I don't know.
More?
I have a spreadsheet, but yeah, definitely more. Probably edging into 130 something, but I don't actually know.
I want to be you when I grow up.
Okay, so what does that equate to a year? How many books do you typically write a year?
I typically write, it has to be more than 10, I guess, because I've been published for 12 and a half years. So, but it's just funny. I'm terrible at keeping track of that stuff. I just kind of, because there's so many different kinds of books, it's almost just like slipping into another like headspace. So I don't know. I think it's funny the way that I don't keep track of it, because it's just like I have my presents and I have my cowboys and I have my desires and I have my women's fiction, and it's all like in different little spots in my head, I guess. So I'm always like, oh, I don't really know how many books I wrote this year.
So since you write those different ones, is there any of them that are easier or harder to write?
I think they're all, I guess, easier and harder in different ways, like, which is one of those weird cop-out answers, but it is true. I will say that Harlequin Presents that was my intro to romance as a reader, and also my intro really to finishing a book and being a writer. And there is something, because they're 50,000 word books and the format is quite, like the format can be quite, I guess the shape of the book or the structure of the book is quite rigid, because you can only put in the romance. There's just not enough space for anything else. So I feel like the shape of that book feels like home to me and very familiar. And there are some neat character things that you can do within that and really play with the form that I find really fun. So I always kind of feel like, oh, like I'm coming home when I do a present. But then I love getting to do, like, the cowboys are a little longer, and there's like some more kind of family dynamic stuff that can go in there. And then you get into the women's fiction, which is like more family dynamic and like a little bit less romance, or maybe romances that are like, would be a little bit trickier to put in a mass market paperback. So I think they all give me something different. But yeah, the Presents is kind of it's like my home team.
So what
Nice.
genres do you write in, Maisey?
So I do trade. I do women's fiction, which this is my one coming out at the end of June, and I cannot get that cover to show up. I'm sitting in front of a window, so it's all like, and then I have the longer cowboys. I have shorter cowboys. I may or may not write historical under a different name.
Wow. People asked if they were all under your name. I like.
They're not. So I'm like, I guess that's kind of a secret, but I did out myself in my private group already. So I'm like, I don't know. It's one of those things that I have a friend who has like 3 pseudonyms, and she's like, no matter how many times I tell people, they don't know. So like mine was a secret, and now I guess it's a badly kept secret, but it's just another Harlequin. I do Harlequin historicals and also presents under Millie Adams, but it's not like I said, it's not a very well kept secret. But it was kind of secret for a while. But I'll say
it's a secret now.
I know everybody who's watching that now too. But yeah. So, and that's where.
You heard it here, folks.
Yeah, right.
You know,
got the scoop.
Writing like 4 books a year under that other name as well. So.
I don't know how you keep track of the books you're writing, the books you're editing, the books you're doing galley proofs for, proofing, and the books you're marketing. Like,
well, marketing and me is kind of LOL. I mean, I don't really do that. I'm bad at it. I'm like, I come to things like this when people ask me and enjoy that. But I don't spend a lot of time on that. My thing is always like, write the next book. But I'm like monogamous too. So I have to like if it's time to edit something, I cannot also be writing something. So I'm very, and I've tried to do like multiple things, and I'll like flirt with it sometimes, but it just like long term, that never works for me. I get a certain amount deep in a revision and I have to be all in that revision. So I have to stop what I'm doing, or I'll like start writing 2 books at once, where one's like a morning project and I'm like typing, like, cause I'll do them different too. Like I'll be dictating my main book and then I'll be like, oh, I'm going to write like 1,000 words in the morning on this other book. And, I can never keep that up, because I end up getting like too involved in the big one, and then I can't like think about anything else. So a lot of it is just like very careful scheduling and like compartmentalizing and kind of knowing what's coming up. And sometimes I get myself into little, like today I got some copy edits that are due back like May 9th. And I'm like, oh, that kind of sucks, because I have a deadline May 6th and I'm not going to do them while I'm, finishing this book. So that means I'll be working over the weekend. So it's like not my preference, but every so often that kind of thing happens, and then I just deal with it. But I have learned that like I need it compartmentalized, and that's just how I keep things together. And that allows me to like be fully with the book that I'm working on, which I find is important for me.
Nice. Well, you gave us a perfect segue into talking about your dictation. So
Yeah.
I do remember listening to this workshop by you, and you talking about how you spend so much time in the car. I can't remember whether it's because you're far away from the school or something, but you spend all this time in the car and you dictate like 40 hours, like 40 minutes a day or something, like while you're driving, or 40. I can't tell us about your dictating.
Yeah, so I live far from town, which is where we have to do everything. So if I've got like free time by myself in the car, that's kind of how it started. I have systematically like made it so I like my husband does most of the running around. It has to be said, all credit to him. And I'll do some driving like kind of out up to the lake and stuff, and like a little more rural, which is more pleasant than trying to do it while running errands. But I really started because back even, oh gosh, how long has it even been? Really, our kids have all been at the same school only for like 2 years. So there was a good long period of time where like drop off and pick up required more than one adult. Like out of necessity, I was doing tons and tons of driving. So dictation in the car would really save my word count. And the bonus about that is that it kind of functions like, like a Mac Freedom program or something, where it's like you can't do anything else because you're just kind of sitting there looking at the road. So like I can't click away from my manuscript and go look at something online. Like people don't believe this, but it's totally true. I have the worst attention span in the entire world. Like I'm really not well suited to like a self-directed job, but I have a lot of fear. So I always imagine myself like Indiana Jones running away from a boulder, and the boulder is my deadline. So I'm always like, just don't slow down or it's going to run you over. And then the next one will run you over. So you just kind of have to keep going. But I have found that like much like I used to brainstorm while I drove, like it kind of engages this part of your brain. And because it's like a really lovely, like rural drive, a lot of it, like not traffic, it's like windy highways and stuff. I'm like, I would do a lot of thinking. And then it started being like, well, why not just like talk the book out while I'm doing it? And so that has become a huge lifesaver for me, particularly when I'm having trouble focusing, or there's like other things going on that make it really tough. Like there's a zone that I can kind of get into when I do that, that is really specific and like really engages, I think, interesting parts of creativity too. Like you end up making kind of different choices because you're on the road and you have to like come up with something, and like sometimes you have to pull over and like make notes, or I do. But like, yeah, I don't know. I found it to be like really interesting, and like I am such a big fan of having like lots of tools in the toolbox to get something done, because you just never know what's I typed like, and this is so strange for me that I'm working on a women's fiction right now, and I typed the first 40,000 words of it, which I so rarely do. I was having a great couple weeks. I was super focused. Then things got a little bit hairy, and I was like, it's got to be dictation, because otherwise like I can't concentrate. I'm sitting at my desk. I'm wanting to like write emails. I'm like taking BuzzFeed quizzes, and I'm like stewing about, things happening in my personal life and all this kind of stuff. So I was like, that's it. Like, you've got to get up and get out. I had like 2 days where I was like, I'm not getting words done. So I'm like, yep, you got to go deal with yourself. So yeah, that's one reason I like it, is that it kind of can help out when I'm not like focused and I don't want to work, because who wants to work every day? Not me.
Maisey, do you
What
dictate
dictation do you use?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, Sharon and I are asking the same thing.
Dragon. It's a terrible and buggy program, and it's very, very expensive. But if you're doing lots and lots of words, there's nothing else that works as well. So I have a PC that I use just for dictation because it was garbage on the Mac, and I am a Mac, not a PC. But I have a little HP that I take with me it's just for dictation. I don't even edit on it. It comes right off and goes to my iMac or to my iPad because I can't stand PCs. So, but I'm like, I have to use it. It's a necessary evil for the dictation.
So you just have the laptop in the car open?
Yeah, I don't look at it, but I have found that
Obviously.
Vivian Aren does transcription. And I have found that for some reason, transcription does not pick up my voice as well. I think it's like one or the other for people, and it has to be the way that you pronounce things or something. I have found that I get much higher accuracy going direct I have a headset mic, and I just wear it in the car and dictate and make sure the laptop's kind of out of sight, which can cause problems because like the program can glitch and you don't know it. And you were talking for like 40 minutes and like it didn't get anything in there. Like, no, obviously it was so brilliant, and I will never
exactly
that level of brilliance, and it's gone forever.
Yeah, the brilliant words you'll never get back.
Exactly. So then then I can comfort myself with that. Or my friend Megan Crane, who writes also as Caitlin Cruz and Hazel Beck, was just talking to me about that, and she was talking about how she was going to dictate on her way down to California, and she was like, but the weather was bad, so I didn't think it would be safe. I didn't want to be distracted by anything. And she was like, and of course, nothing is worse than all the words you were going to write, and they never would have been better. Like, she's like, I would have gotten so much done. I was like, I know. That's how I am too. I'm always like, man, that if I had done it today, I would have gotten so much done. Oh yeah.
If I would only remember to write down all the stuff that I thought of those great scenes at 2:00 in the morning,
Right?
they would be awesome if I only remembered them and wrote them down the next
I
day.
email them to myself on my phone. I pick it up. Like I just did that the other night at like 12:30. I emailed myself some nonsense note because then it's in my inbox as a notification. So I'm like, oh, right.
I do that too after I get out of the shower. I will have done like a whole scene in my head, and I just pick up my phone, open an email to myself, and I just say it all out.
I have totally been like, would it be possible to dictate in the shower? Like, could I put something in a plastic bag? Like,
right?
I feel a lot of good thinking done in there.
Somebody needs to invent that, because I think a lot of us get creative in the shower.
Oh, no, somebody get on that. It will not be me.
For me, it's doing laundry for some reason, folding the routine of folding laundry.
Oh, that's funny.
Nice.
I have a question for you. With 130-ish books probably out, which book sort of, even after all this time, just sort of sticks in your brain that is your love child, your whatever book?
That's so funny because it's like there's a few for sure, but I always come back to Smooth Talking Cowboy, which was the first book in my Gold Valley series. And I am constantly trying to figure out why, but it's one of the very few books of mine that I've actually like reread when I had a print copy. And so I was like, it has to be that one. I think I'm a little in love with the hero.
Okay.
He was kind of a more like laid back, different kind of hero for me. And I just really loved their dynamic. And I think also Olivia is the heroine and Luke is the hero. And Olivia was kind of a self-righteous, a little bit of a snotty, judgmental heroine. And I felt like I put everything that is inside of myself that I don't love, that I know is true, and put it into her. And so it was very interesting because then I say I'm a little bit like that, and people are like, wow, you must be a terrible person. I'm like, well, but when there's things, it's not all of who I am, but it's like, those things in yourself that you're like, that's not super attractive. Right. And I don't love that I'm that person. But I was like, she's it. And was working out some of this stuff in me, and like her fearfulness and her need to be like perfect, and the way that she projected that onto other people a little bit. And I was like being like the very good girl that I was growing up, and like I'm an oldest child and I'm such a people pleaser, and in a small town, how intense that can feel sometimes when like you have parents that everybody knows, and like I'm the romance writer whose dad used to do a worship service at the mega church down the street. And so I know what it's like a little bit to be the like a little bit of an odd, and everybody kind of knows you and knows your parents, and there's kind of this expectation. And my husband is another person people all know, and like in this small town. And like I remember not that long ago, it's been a few years now, I went to pick up my husband went and picked up some laundry that I had dropped off at like the laundry service, and they had written Haven's wife on the thing. I knew him, but not me, which is like, I'm Carrie's daughter and Peggy's daughter. I'm, you know, Haven's wife. And that's kind of, I took a lot of that and put it into her. And I think in that like expectation and her fear of like, of being unexpected and of being not living up to that stuff. And then I gave her like this guy that was kind of like a dangerous bad boy a little bit, but he was just so all about her. And I think that's why I love him so much. It's like he was going to do anything for her. And so he's kind of this great wish fulfillment cowboy hero, and he pushes her, but like in all the directions that she needs to go. And so, yeah, smooth talking cowboy. It's my baby.
Well, I swear, I think you're slightly in love with the cowboy we read in this last book.
I do love him. He, because there was a tiny baby, and like, what's hotter than like big muscular men like caring for tiny babies? I did have fun with him.
Yeah, we had fun reading about him.
I was so surprised at how, I mean, even though it's like the first baby, he just sort of, it's like, I think a lot of men are like intimidated by babies, and I find that very unattractive. But like he just like, you know, he's got this baby and he's gonna take care of it. You like, and I just like, oh, you know, like
I love that. Well, I love like alpha heroes, but to me that encompasses like caregiving. Like, that's like, because I'm like, when I think of it, I don't think of like douchey guys on a podcast saying they're an alpha hero, alpha male. If you have to say it, then you're not it.
right.
You know, and to me, that's like the leader of the wolf pack, and the leader of the wolf pack is everybody's dad, right? So they're taking care of everything, and that to me is what makes like a great alpha hero, is that he's not ever gonna like falter in that sense. Like they run from their emotions for sure, but like that he is just super comfortable with babies and stuff. And like I married a man who's like that. Like he's always been very comfortable with kids and babies, and like he's before me, he's the first one to like go pick the baby up wherever it is. And like so I've been around a lot of that energy, I guess. So I'm like, yeah, that's what I like to see.
Well, I love the scene where they went to the store and they were just buying all the things. Like,
yeah,
I could picture it so well, because you acquire, you know, when you have a baby or multiple babies, you acquire things slowly, but you have to go to the store. She got one shot to buy all the things.
Yes, yeah. I love like things like that, because I think I had them go to Fred Meyer, which is just the Pacific Northwest Kroger. But I love like getting to put that's one thing I really love about writing the cowboy books, is that they're set in Oregon, whereas I do the presents and they're set like all over the place. So there's like no, I mean, I've been to some of the places, but like some of the countries are made up. And it's like, I really love getting to do like little things that are familiar to me. And I was like, I know that baby section. That's where I shop for baby things. And I love that, like, you know, I just kind of love getting to put that stuff in there that feels really familiar. And that was kind of fun, because my kids they're old now. My oldest son just turned 16. But I remember that so clearly. Like that, and like all the things that you needed, and how overwhelming it feels when you've never taken care of a baby before. Like I remember just constantly being like fatigued and sweaty, like lugging all the baby stuff around with the first one. And then it's like you get used to it and you're like, I already come with all the accessories, we might as well add another kid to the pile. But you know, so yeah, that was all right. Putting all that in was kind of fun. I'm actually not a big one for putting kids in books. I have steadfastly avoided putting a lot of small children into books. I prefer teenagers. I've written a few like teen kids and like single dads with like teenage kids, because I think that's fun when they talk back. I think teenagers are really fun and funny, and I kind of enjoy my kids' sass. So yeah, this was it was fun to do a baby because I don't do that very often for all my lots of books.
Well, that leads into one of our questions here that one of our readers has asked is about, do you find when writing babies or kids that they can get in the way of the romance, the kissing bits, and how do you navigate that?
Well, I navigate it much the way that I navigated that in real life, having kids and being married. I'm like, that's everything good happens after they go to bed.
Yeah.
And the only thing about very new babies is that they're in bed a lot.
Yeah, they sleep a lot.
So I do very consciously choose to write small babies when I write babies, because I'm like, you don't want them mobile and getting into everything. So I'm like, if it's a baby, it's got to be a baby, and it's got to be like in a front pack, and they need to be able to like put it down for a nap. But I always just think of it in those terms. And I remember the first time I had to write a kid, and I don't know if anyone's familiar with like when Harlequin does connected series with multiple authors in their category lines, they give us outlines. And so while we get a lot of license with what we choose to do with that, we are given like the initial setup so that everybody's books kind of go together, because they're giving us like the overarching plot. And we used to do like 8 books by 8 authors in presents. So that was pretty complicated. And the first one I ever did, they gave me a single mom with a 5-year-old, and my son was 5 at the time. And I was like, well, here's what I know about kids. They never contribute to the conversation in any helpful way. So my rule for that kid was that he was never allowed to be on topic. So he was always just derailing the conversation, because I was like, I don't like it when kids are like too precocious, you know? So I was like, I had this kid that was like constantly derailing the conversation. But I did note that most of the scenes took place at night in that book, because the kid had to be in bed. Even though the hero was a king and there were nannies and things, I was like, the kid's got to be in bed so that we can actually get some real adult conversation and activity happening. In real life as in fiction.
So are you a plotter or a pantser?
I'm a little of both, but I can only, I don't like to do detailed outlines, because then if the book needs to change direction, I cannot think around it. And I end up like really stuck going like, well, this, I know that I'm no longer writing toward this, but I can't like break it down enough to get like where I need to go. And it'll take me like too long to change direction. So what I tend to do is I know the setup and I know quite a bit about the characters, and then I'll kind of plot a certain number of scenes at a time. But I don't like to get too far ahead of myself, because I just causes me problems, and that I know from experience. Although the women's fictions that have lots of characters, and like The Lost and Found Girl, which is coming out at the end of June, it has more of a mystery to it. And so there were things that I did need to know, and there were plot turning points that I needed to know, but a lot of the in-between stuff I left kind of elastic. So, but definitely with the romances, I need the characters to lead it, because they're so character driven. And if I get too rigid and handsy with that, then my characters can start not coming across as authentic. And that's where I get major revisions, because they're like, well, why did they do that? And it's like, I don't know, because I decided they were going to before I started the book. And then they did that. And now it doesn't make sense. You're right. So I've learned not like a little bit of plotting at a time.
Well, in this book, was there anything that surprised you in the storyline from beginning to end?
Yeah. I mean, I'm just thinking, because I remember I had written Colt's brother's book, and there was a point where I kind of switched some things around with them, and I had finished Jake's book already, and I realized that I wanted to steal his conflict for Colt, and so I switched it. Oh, that surprised me. So I ripped some stuff out of another book, changed it, because I'm always early. So I go, just send me my manuscript back. I'm going to change this, or I'm going to do it when I do revisions or whatever. And then I kind of changed that in Colt's book, because it just felt authentic to him more. And then also Mallory was really interesting to write, because I was very sympathetic to the fact that she had been kind of stuck in the relationship that she was in, but I also understood that people would probably judge her harshly. And I thought to really explain the way that you get stuck in those patterns and the way that you get into relationships that don't serve you anymore when you're past a certain point. I did think that there, at a certain point when, oh, I remember how that came about. Sorry, it's so funny. I'm sitting here in front of the arc of this book, and I was watching some things about, because this book is about a girl who is discovered abandoned on a bridge when she's a baby, and it's basically her trying to figure out who abandoned her and like what happened. And I was watching all of these testimonials on YouTube about these teen girls who were talking about getting pregnant really young, and I started I listened to all these stories, and I was working on Colton Mallory's book at the time. And I remember when I realized like that made the most sense for why she was so bonded to this guy. And it was one of those elements where, because in the first book where Mallory had showed up, she was with her deadbeat boyfriend. And so I had written her with this guy, and I knew, I didn't decide until way later, oh, I'm going to put her with Colt. That came up. Like, I didn't know that in the beginning. And I was like, I can't leave Griffin's sister with this horrible douchey dude that appeared in Griffin's book when the family had come to visit him. And I was like, she needs a cowboy. And I was like, well, it's going to be Colt. And so that, and then you go, oh, that was a great idea, but now I have to be in her head. It was the same thing actually with Smooth Talking Cowboy and the heroine I was just talking about, Olivia. She was on the page a lot of different times being kind of a snotty, like judgmental, uptight person. And then it was all fun and games, so I had to write her, and I had to explain why she was that way. I was like, she was a great foil when I wasn't in her head for kind of this complication in these scenes, but when you actually have to explain somebody, and Mallory was a little like that. So I would say that like the pregnancy storyline, because she was a character that existed in other books, that was something I didn't know I was going to do, that she had a teen pregnancy and a pregnancy loss, because that came later as an inspiration for explaining how she ended up kind of stuck in this relationship.
You know, one thing I really, really liked was sort of, I don't think it was love at first sight, but there was like a connection at first sight. And I feel like you did that connection so well, because it's so believable, you know. I mean, people get on, oh, insta love is so bad, but, and I wouldn't say it was insta love, but there was like this instant connection, you know, with him, just by sight, just by eye contact, and that was just powerful.
Yeah, especially because it was the very first scene.
Yeah.
Sentence.
Yeah.
And that is like, it's really funny because this is now the second book club I've done with this book, and I'm like, this is so off brand for me. You don't even know. I mean, like, I love long, drawn out sexual tension. Like, longing is my big thing. I'm like, if I can draw it out so that people are not kissing until 100 pages in and everybody just dying for them to kiss, I love to do that. That is like my favorite thing. And so sex in the first chapter is very like, and it is very, very not me. But I knew that was right for them, because again, I was like, this woman I was like, she needs that. Yeah. And I was like, that chemistry and stuff, I was like, it has to be something that just overtakes them. Like, it just has to be, because they're both otherwise too logical to like jump into that right now. Her, especially because she's so kind of wounded. And I just love the idea that like she saw him, and even though she was with, I forgot the boyfriend's name, I feel like that's deliberate. Jared. Yeah, of course.
That's right. I forgot too.
I forgot his name, like, it was Jared, who didn't go down on her. That's
right.
Yeah.
That I remembered clearly. But, oh gosh.
But you know, something else that was really cool is when she says to him, and I forget the exact words, but something like, well, we don't know each other. And he said, we've known each other 6 months. And
yeah,
I
love that.
Oh, I love that too.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of love a rake hero. I'm like, that's just I just love that. And I kind of, because he was in such a tortured space, I was like, he has to be like overcome. And I do love that. I love it when other people do it. It's just not something that I do very much. So it was fun.
Well.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. So I thought that it was, I think there's a question about another genre that you want to write in. And I think it's really interesting that you've started writing women's fiction. And we forgot to mention earlier, which it was my job, so I failed. So sorry about that. But we are going to, it's not too late. We are going to, Maisey has graciously agreed to give away an arc of one of her new women's fiction that's just coming out, the one that she's telling us about. That sounds so exciting. I'm dying to read that one. And then also her new cowboy book that's coming out, which, say the name one more time of it.
Unbridled Cowboy, and that's the first book in my Four Corners series, so I'm super excited about that.
Tell us about each one real quick.
Yeah, tell us about the books.
Okay, so this actually goes really well with your genre question, because I think one thing that I'm like super interested in, I actually love like British murder mysteries and stuff, and I spend tons of time watching those, and I was a big mystery reader before I ever read romance, and I love very specific thrillers. Like I love Jane Harper. I love thrillers like primarily by women. I love Leanne Moriarty. I love that kind of mystery element, but when it's still very like character driven. And so there's a little bit of that in here. And that if I was going to like write something that was a total departure, that would definitely be what it was. And so The Lost and Found Girl is about Ruby McKee, who was found on basically 2 days before Christmas on a bridge as a newborn baby. And that came about because I literally read 2 news stories in a row about babies being found like on the side of the road. Like it's amazing. It's amazing that it happens like more than once a year, like somewhere. And I just, and she became kind of this symbol of hope for this small town where a teenage girl had disappeared the year prior. And it was like they lost like a daughter of the town, and then one kind of came to them, and she was a big worldwide news story that she'd been found by these girls, and then she was adopted by the family that found her. And now she's coming back at 22, and she's kind of questioning some things that about her own narrative, because she's kind of considered miraculous in some way, and it's not really based on anything she did. And she's kind of interrogating these different narratives in this small town. And I am from a small town, and this was very much like I borrowed some things, you know, that we experienced. We live in a really rural area. It's one of those places where people don't lock their doors. Like we used to wander around all the time. And then when I was 10 years old, a 15-year-old girl went missing. And that was just not something that happened here. And we knew her family. That changed everything, because it was like my mom didn't want us to walk down to the school anymore, where we used to just go play unsupervised, like after school, and we used to walk to the store, and like we all felt really safe. And then that kind of challenges how you feel. And so I wanted to include that, that element in this book, because I found that it was an interesting thing to go through. And I so that it's a little bit of like some fiction and some like reality in that. And then, sorry, just 1 second.
And while you're looking at that, like you have to tell us what happened to the girl.
Yeah, I know. I was just gonna.
I mean, it's not a happy ending. I will tell you that right now. They found her body like 15 years later. At a house that I used to house sit at. It's actually so creepy. Like literally this is my son's executive function coach, and he's not logged in for his session. And I just need to make sure that happens. This is what happens when you have kids. And so I just need to make sure so texted that to my husband, like forward that on. But yes, so that was not a happy ending, but it was a big like mystery. And it was someone who was known to her, and who then had been arrested for something else at some point. I think he was in prison when they actually like discovered her, because he was not a good. But that was really interesting too, because my mom always felt like she knew, because there was a group of kids that used to like wander around, and she was like, I don't like them, they're bad news, and she was right. So that was very like, that was like a huge thing. This is a place where we don't have like even a violent crime every year. So that was a really defining thing in my childhood. And like, definitely with like in The Lost and Found Girl, a big part of that is like, because people want to be comfortable when things are scary, they want to draw a line under it. And so they wanted to make a villain really quickly and deal with it and have it be done. And they wanted Ruby and her discovery to fix it and heal it. And that left kind of the mother of the missing girl, you know, not very taken care of, because people are uncomfortable with grief and they're uncomfortable with hard things. And so a lot of the book is about that. But there's romance in it and stuff, because it's me and like, sorry, I'm turning into a ghost because the sun came out in my window. But yeah, so there's romance in it and like sisters and a mystery. And I really loved writing this book, and I loved, like, you know, I'm always like, oh, that's what trauma's for. You throw it in the book. So there's that one. And then it has decidedly less. Well, no, it still has trauma because all of my characters have trauma, but it's not like as real world. The Four Corners series came about because I wanted to do something a little bit different for me. Like, all of my Westerns are centered around small towns. So I had Silver Creek was my first series, and then Copper Ridge, and then Gold Valley. And I had done kind of the small town Western where it's like there is a ranch, but a lot of it's centered in town. And I had this idea to do, I was looking at like the biggest ranch spreads like in Oregon and how big they were, and like how big they are like across to drive, you know, and all this stuff. And I got this idea to do like 4 really huge ranches that all kind of meet. And so that's where Four Corners comes from. And they've been run by the same 4 families since the 1800s. And they work in co-op together, kind of to ranching all these different things and covering each other in the lean year, like seasons and all that kind of stuff. And so the ranch itself is sort of the town. They have a 1-room schoolhouse. They have lots and lots of employees. They like kind of are out in the middle of nowhere, essentially, with their own little community. And so it's very, very, very centered on the ranch. And it had kind of a Wild West flair to it when I came up with it. And I thought it would be really fun if I could figure out how to do a mail order bride story in a contemporary romance. And so basically Sawyer Garrett, who, if people who have been reading me for a long time know, the Garretts were like the first family in my Copper Ridge series, which was kind of my first big, like, popular romance, Western romance series. And this family in the Four Corners series, the Garretts, they're cousins to those other Garretts. And so you will see those other Garretts in the book as well. And so Sawyer Garrett ends up, like a one-night stand of his has a baby. She doesn't want the baby. He decides that he does. And also that he wants a wife, but all the marriages in his family have turned out really bad, except his grandfather, who got a mail order bride. And so he thinks that an arranged marriage, like where you have like, or a kind of a marriage of convenience where you have like agreed to these terms, is the only way it's ever going to work out. So he puts an ad on a website, basically asking a woman to come to his ranch, and like she'll get to live in the house, and like he needs these certain things. He's got a baby, he's looking for a mom for the baby. And the heroine, Evelyn, lives in New York City. She's never been to the West Coast. She's never lived in the country. But her whole life implodes when she sees her best friend and business partner having sex with her fiance in like an office that she's just walked into. So she loses her best friend, her job, and her fiance all in kind of one moment. She's sitting on the couch eating ice cream and crying and watching Hallmark movies, and basically fantasizing how her life would be if it was simpler and she lived in the country and like it was a small town and people were nice and reasonable, and she just feels like everyone's betrayed her, and like she's doom scrolling on her phone and like finds this ad, and she thinks he's never going to contact me, but he does. He calls her, and then she decides to come out and see what this is all about. And they end up getting married, and she's a mail order bride. And it's actually and finds out it's actually a big transition to go from New York to the middle of nowhere in Oregon to dealing with this guy who has his own set of issues. And she definitely has hers, but she loves the baby immediately. And she just really wants to make it work. It's really like, it was very, very, very fun. And
what's the title?
It's called Unbridled Cowboy, and it's out May 24th. And one of those things I'm like, people are going to have to get on the ride. It's a contemporary ride book. Just get on the ride.
And when's your next presents coming out?
Oh, November, I think. November. Yes, I think, end of November. So it's a December presents, but it'll be out. My first sheet book in a lot of years.
I loved the sheep books back in the day. When I was in high school, I read all of them.
I'm getting feedback over here. I don't know if it's me or not.
Yeah, I'm getting it too for some reason.
Yeah. My internet keeps going in and out. So
Okay. Well, as long as we'll ignore it. It's the ghost in the chat.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
So that'll be, and then I think, sorry, I'm telling you, I'm the worst at this part. I'm like, write books, that's fine. I can do all that. But remembering when they're coming out and actually remembering to tell people about them, I'm not good at that part. There is a Desire coming out called something at some time. But you know what? Go to my website, because that's where I keep track of those things. When they send me covers, I'm like, oh right, there's that book. So yeah, I'm not good at that part. I'm like, I like making new stories up. I don't really like, I'm not great at like remembering the one I already did.
Well, someone did ask about where you get your inspirations from, but it sounds like you get it from everywhere.
Everywhere, all the time. I love stories, and I love I just like hang on to everything. And I really do think like, well, what's the point of going through something if you don't write it down? Like if you don't get to use it later. So some of it comes from me, and like usually it's enough pieces of enough different things that nothing is actually autobiographical or taken directly from anyone's life, but it's like things in the community. Like I'm fascinated by the dynamics in small towns, because people are like, oh, they're so friendly. I'm like, only because you're going to run into them again. So if you're going to burn a bridge, you better be really, really sure you want to not cross that again. Because you don't know if you're going to be mean to somebody over here, and then their dad is in charge of your mortgage documents over at the bank, and everything starts to get complicated. So like as a lifelong resident of the same small town, I think a lot about connections and assumptions that people make about each other. And I'm nosy, so I'm always like watching people's Facebook drama and like figuring out how to use that, and like stealing things from shows and stealing things from news stories. And I always say that I'm a control freak in a chaotic world. And so a lot of times I'll see just like a horrendous news story, and I'm like, how does anybody survive that? How do you come back from that? And that is often an emotional jumping off point, particularly for a romance, because I think that's what romance novels are all about. It is not just how do you take a character down into the abyss, which I think what's interesting about, genres that tend to be taken more seriously is they delight in taking characters down to rock bottom. And what we have to do is bring them back up. And that's actually hard work. And that is actually deep character study. I mean, I always say romance novelists are armchair psychologists. Mm-hmm. Like because the business of falling in love is complex, and people do it in unique ways, and it feels so high stakes when it's used. So yeah, I love to kind of take things like that. How do you bring something to a place where they can be in love?
Well, you did that with Colt and Mallory really well. I mean, they both hit the deep end pretty hard.
Awesome.
It came back up. So
who's your like one author that you like? Whenever they have a book out, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm buying it. Like, who is your go-to author?
Oh gosh, there are a few. I love Regency historicals, and so I would always say like Lisa Kleypas and Julianne Long. I loved. I'm Only Wicked for You, which was 2 books ago, I guess, for Julianne Long, and that was incredible. And I read the back of it, and I was like, American Hero for Regency. I don't know, but I loved it. I thought it was so good. And then. Yeah, I love Lisa Kleypas. She's been around for a long time. I adore her. And then for contemporary, I love Caitlin Cruz's COWBOY, Cold River series. And I love Jackie Ashton has a new series out with Source Books that's set in New Zealand. I've been a fan of Jackie's for disclosure. We've been critique partners for like 13 years, since before either of us were published. But I love her books, and I'm like so thrilled that she has a book set in New Zealand out on shelves in mass market in the US that's like not a category romance with Harlequin, because that's a really hard sell. Like small town that's not set in America is something she was pretty much told nobody was ever going to buy that. She's been writing with an American accent for a long time. So getting to actually write like guys in New Zealand, you know, and getting to use like her lingo and her setting and stuff. And I'm thrilled about that. And I love all her books, but I'm like, I know how sentimental this is, and like it feels really cool. So Find Your Way Home is the title of that book, and that's out right now. And I love that. So, and then I love Leanne Moriarty and Jane Harper, for like more like mystery thrillery type things.
Very cool. Well,
do you read any paranormal?
Well, yes. So I
that's a perfect segue, isn't it? I already know what you're gonna say.
Well, yeah, Small Town Big Magic by Hazel Beck. That is the book that I'm the most excited about. And I am like an epic fangirl. I'm gonna pull up their cover on my phone. So they are a writing duo of Megan Crane and Caitlin Cruz. Or not, Megan Crane is Caitlin Cruz, of Megan Crane and Nicole Helm. And they are also my very good friends, but I am actually a super picky reader, and I am not often like the biggest paranormal fan in the world, but I love this book so much. And it is coming out August 23rd. And it is like,
oh, that looks good.
Like, oh my gosh, it's so good. And I was with them when they like conceptualized the idea, and I have never experienced such like creative energy. It was just so neat. And like, I am a writer, and I've still never seen anything come together in quite that way. We were in St. Charles, Missouri the day before Halloween, and it's like the oldest town in the Midwest. And so it's a red brick and like limestone and really beautiful old town. And I live near a historic gold rush town also. So I love stuff like this. And I used to do living history and all that kind of stuff. And I am such a history nerd. I was just loving it. But they had like cobwebs and like pumpkins everywhere. It was all decked out for Halloween. And we kept going, this is like super haunted. Like this looks like a witch lives here, you know, like this, and so they started talking. I was riding in the back seat and they were driving around in the front. Nicole always drives us around the Midwest and like shows us things. And, you know, they're going, well, if it was a witch series, like what would it be? And like, what would the story be? And they're just kind of talking. And I was just listening, and it just like came together. And I remember Megan was like, well, I'm going to pitch this book series if you don't. So like something, you know, and Nicole was kind of like, if you can't write the Midwest is mine. And they were like, we have to do it together, because they'd come up with so much. And they go, did you want to write one, Maisey? And I said, nope, I don't. I don't want to do anything that collaborative. And so I have just gotten to be the fan, and that is like so fun. And I read like early versions of it, and then read the version that they of course had like a big auction for, because it was so fantastic.
Oh,
and
wow.
And then I got to read the whole book, and I got to read the second one already. And I'm just so like, I'm so excited about it. And it's about a bookstore owner and Chamber of Commerce president. And she's very kind of Leslie Knope. I love Parks and Rec, and that energy just really speaks to me. I'm like, I love a competent woman who knows what's up, but who's like very upbeat and willing to do all the hard work herself. And like, she, is kind of in a little bit of a spat with the mayor of the town, trying to get things done. And then she ends up getting attacked by paranormal creatures that she's never seen before. And when she tries to defend herself, light comes out of her hands. And that's when she finds out that she's a witch. And in fact, everybody in town's a witch, but they erased her memories because they said she didn't have enough magic. And so the book is about her getting her magical memories back and discovering that she is actually a very powerful witch, and them kind of forming a coven to stop the dark forces coming. And then the rest of the series kind of focuses on a different witch in the coven. And it's super fun.
Wow.
When does that come out, Maisey?
That comes out August 23rd with Graydon House Books, which is an imprint of Harlequin. And super excited about it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here with us. Like, we really enjoyed having you, and we loved this book.
Love this book. It was wonderful. Thank you so much.
That was one of our favorites.
I had so much fun. Like, I love coming and talking. So like anytime, like my favorite. Like I said, I'm not so much with promo, but I'm very social. So this is like extremely much up my alley. So thank you so much for having me.
All right. Well, bye, Maisey. Thanks for being here.
Bye, Maisey. Oh, yeah, that was wonderful. I loved having Maisey on.
Oh, she told so many great stories.
I know.
I know.
I'll see her when I grow up.
I
130.
know. I
And
know.
I have
She looks like a
to
slacker.
like 5. She's 130. Like, oh, I feel like a baby.
I know.
Well, we have a few minutes to tell you about our new book that we're going to read.
Oh, wait.
And
Sharon's got questions first.
I got questions.
Yes, I know.
I'm
sorry. I'm just going to say, Sharon's going to give us our questions before she introduces the new book. And we're all really excited about the new book that we're going to read this month. You guys are in for a great treat.
So this book, so the question is for you to get to know us a little bit better. We're going to put the poll up and in the group. We'd love for you to answer it. And it has the question ties into the book that we're reading. So the question is, well, we all had diaries growing up, and we're not going to include Diana because she's not here. But for the three of us, we all had diaries. So which one of us had a diary where they ranted about their friends endlessly and all the small petty things that happened in their life? Who had a diary where she wrote about lyrics and boys, or wrote her own original lyrics and lamented about boys? And who actually didn't really keep a diary because she was so worried her family was going to read it and wanted to keep it private? So I'll put the poll up tomorrow and you can guess, see who matches up with those questions. So the next book we're going to read actually just came out last week, and I just saw it tonight. It has hit like all of these amazing lists. It is our first, well, not really our first, but it's our first dual timeline women's fiction book. And we are going to be reading The Lost Book of Eleanor Dare by Kimberly Brock. This has like movie written all over it. And it's about a woman who lost her husband overseas during World War II. And it's a dual timeline of her and Eleanor Dare, who, in case you don't know who Eleanor Dare is, she was the child born at the Roanoke colony that then disappeared. And then in the 1930s, archaeologists discovered stones in Georgia, not too far from Savannah. They were called the Dare Stones, and they believe it's a message that the people who left the colony and headed south left these stones as a message as to what happened to them. But when Sir Walter Raleigh came back to the colony, all he saw was devastation. There was no one left. And there was one word written in a tree called and it was Croatoan. And to this day, no one knows what happened to the lost colony. No, and all they know is that Eleanor Dare was the first baby born to a colonist in the United States. So anyway, this book takes a wonderful fictional historical view of what happened to Eleanor Dare when an ancestor of hers in the 1940s finds her diary. So yeah, it's I'm really excited. Like I said, this is going to be a movie. There's just no question. With all the hype it's getting, it's hit all of these bestseller lists. It's I think going to be the Georgia. It's up for like Georgia Book of the Year. So anyway, I'm really excited that Kimberly's going to come on and talk. And I've known Kimberly for a decade, so I'm very, very happy for her.
Wow, I can't wait to read it because you've just sold me so completely on this one. It just sounds so good.
Yeah.
And it has a beautiful literary feel to it. It's just very different.
Yeah.
Because we did put up a poll for those of you may or may not have seen it in the group. We want to know what you want to read. We are trying to read different things because we all love so many different genres. So anyway, so we thought we'd try a dual timeline women's fiction book. Anyway, so let us know in the comments what you think about that. And we will leave the comments open, I believe, until Sunday, right? When we do the winner for Maisey's book.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for being here today. We really appreciate all of you and all your questions. And thank you to Maisey for being here too.
Good night.
All right. Bye.